Recount. What's going on, everyone? This is Jordan Smart. We're so glad that you're here with us on Affirmative Interaction. Welcome to the season finale, episode 30.
30.
I mean, come on. Let's just kind of like think about this for a second. Guys, what do you think? 30 episodes. How are you feeling right now?
Tired.
Wow, way more official than I thought this would ever be. I'm gonna tell you that right now. We started off very awkward. We didn't have a name.
That's crazy.
Like the first 8 episodes, we didn't even have a name. So
I didn't even know that was streaming. Adrian be like, "Yeah, Nick started this Zoom thing," and I thought you guys were just on Zoom talking to each other. I didn't know that. I didn't know you guys.
Let's go out of our way to use Zoom.
We needed more Zoom in our lives. Yeah.
Way more. I mean, it's wild because I remember us starting and so much. It just feels like so much time has passed just in a small window of time. Like I literally changed computers because my camera quality sucked on like the first few episodes of the show. But Logan, how do you feel about coming in at episode 30?
Oh, no, I mean, it's good. I think it's funny we talk about the name because I always kind of felt like the name was a little bit just Nixon being a troll. And so, like with me and you put the white fist in there and it just kind of like stuck. It's just so funny, like how it's kind of, I mean, the first week we were just trying to talk about COVID and like what it's felt for us, and now it like pretty much Ahmaud Arbery hit, and we were like, oh wow, we need to talk about some more serious topics with this than we are, and it became a place to really navigate Adventism and politics, and a little bit of sports early on, and just like perspectives, and especially I think we've lacked some bridge building understanding, especially a lot of stuff we've done with Blackness, which has been really, educational for me. And I know a lot of people have reached out to me and said that they really enjoy that perspective that they don't necessarily find on their own timelines. So I've enjoyed it a lot for sure.
Excellent. That reminds me, Logan, Mike, was it you that said that a teacher took an episode of ours and showed it in her class, or?
Yeah, it was his. It's my boy. His name is Kareem. I worked with him at the Council on American Islamic Relations in Chicago when I was in law school, and I'm trying to remember which episode it was. I think it was. Sadly, we've done how many episodes now? After was it after Breonna Taylor?
I think it was Breonna Taylor when they came with the verdict, because they talked about lawyers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he said he showed it in his class and that they were able to have a really good dialogue about it. I think if I remember correctly, he teaches high schoolers. So yeah, I mean, I was pretty blown away by his message. First of all, I didn't even know that he was watching because I hadn't seen him in the comments or anything. But that he not only watched but showed his students. Yeah, this has gone way farther than us on Zoom with hats on because we couldn't get haircuts. That's literally how it started. So, like literally. So, it's really cool, man. 30 episodes is pretty crazy.
It's super wild, man. We come a long way, and we're exceedingly glad that all of you that are watching have rocked with us for so long. Please let us know where you're watching from. Special shout out to Jasmine, Mike Miller, I'm blanking on their names, but is it Sandy and
Larry and Sandy Feldman? Yeah.
Larry and Sandy have always, for as much as they could, they've been watching our show. Mike has too, and I did see Logan's. Yes, Marsha Stout. Thank you for joining us too. We're just excited.
That's moms.
We're just excited that you guys take the time out to spend some time with us. And let us know where you're watching from, and please make sure you share this video. So before we get onto the topics, just want to remind you that our podcast is still up on Spotify, on Apple Music. So if you're on your way to wherever you're going during a pandemic, or if you're even going on a walk, I know Adrian goes on walks. I heard it's very therapeutic for anyone that goes on a walk. Make sure you listen to our podcast on the go. It's a really easy way to just get in on our conversation after the fact. So, and also make sure you follow us on social media too. And yes, again, please make sure you share this video. This is episode 30. Happy anniversary in a way. So, I mean, let's just talk about it. And I feel like what we're going to talk about is going to fill up our entire runtime, which is exciting because just last week we were exceedingly stressed at what was happening or what was going to happen in our country. And then now we are seeing a electoral college, an election victory for Joe Biden, where he has 290 electoral college votes, beating out Trump at 217, which is wild. And there's a lot of blue across this map. Mike, would you mind putting up that electoral college map real quick? Guys, before we kind of talk about, the fallout of this election, let's talk about the flips. I think the flips have been the biggest surprise for all of us. What do you guys think about, let's say, Pennsylvania flipping? What are your thoughts on that?
Black people.
Fake.
He said fake. Let me try to make it a little bigger.
I think, Biden and Kamala had to really take their time, not just in their speech on Saturday, but like multiple speeches and tweets after that to really thank Black people, specifically Black women, because they knew that they would have lost this election without Black people, specifically Black women. The demographics of how things have shifted, Democrats can't really depend on like the rural vote to, bring them to victory. They can't really expect to have the white male vote in their corner either. And so, they're not winning, Michigan, Pennsylvania, or Georgia without Black people voting in those numbers, which is what, the New York Times talked about was that was why Hillary lost in 2016. Black people, for a number of reasons, did not go out and vote for her as much of a percentage as they did this year. And so like it's just a testament, man. Like you're excited at the fact that like we literally won this election, but it is sad that it always comes down to perhaps the most oppressed demographic to save the country from itself. Literally every election. Because, like we said, Biden doesn't win this without people in Philly, people in Detroit, people in Milwaukee, people in Atlanta. He's not winning it without us. And so, he put out a tweet earlier today, which was essentially like I'm in debt to you. And so he is essentially implying throughout the rest of the tweet that he will produce something for us in return. And so I think he understands, not just him, but I would like to believe the Democratic Party as a whole recognizes for a lot of Black voters, yes, they hated Trump, but it was like y'all got one final vote out of me before we kind of lose our, energy towards the Democratic Party. So we'll see what they do with that vote, man.
Esther, what are your thoughts on this?
I honestly, this whole election, it just really makes me think about how Black people have really been saving American democracy since this country was founded.
Yeah.
Like ever since Black people have been here, we have been fighting to make America live up to the democracy that it says that it is. Right? Like we have been fighting to actually make the Constitution true, right? That's what we've been doing. Without the work of Black people, even right now, the Constitution isn't necessarily completely fulfilled, and what we claim to be in our documents isn't completely fulfilled. But without the work of Black people, we would not be anywhere near to where we are at now. in terms of really living up to those ideals of equality that we claim to have been founded on. And then to see it again happen in this election, to just really see like once again, we were on the brink of falling even further backwards from that promise for the foreseeable future. And once again, Black people are the people, and it wasn't just Black people. It's fair. It's something that we should point out. There was also Indigenous voters in the Southwest, Latino voters in places. The disabled vote is, I think, something that hasn't been brought up enough. But like a lot of those mail-in ballots are coming from the disabled community, people who cannot physically vote because of pre-existing conditions that make them more at risk during the pandemic or for other reasons. So like really it has always been oppressed people that are continuously making America what America claims that it is. And so I think this election is just another example of that coming to life, and how we really would not be a democracy without all of these groups of people. Like the people that are constantly being beaten down and excluded from the conversation are the same people that are constantly trying to make America the country that it has always claimed itself to be, but has often fallen short. We are the only reason why we're even close. So that's just what I was thinking about.
It's a very good thought from both of you, because, you know, from what I read, a lot of analysts were saying that Democrats were expecting a sort of blue wave to just sweep the country. But instead, what we saw, in part because of Stacey Abrams and organizers like her, a lot of, in fact, organizing and a lot of just literally flipping of states, getting people to register to vote, coming out in droves in different states and counties where people did not expect to go blue. So instead of this wave, Democrats were saved by, I would say, maybe a group of people that they weren't paying as much attention to as they are now.
Yeah, it's interesting within that. Just to piggyback on that thought is, it's not Democrats, though. It's just Biden. Like, they didn't want Trump, because the red wave actually happened in the Senate and in the House. They got more seats in both than they were predicted to win. People were just like, yeah, I'll vote locally and statewide for my candidates, but I just want Trump out of the White House. And that is really what's so interesting about this. Biden's calling falsity, or Trump's calling, it's a false election. And I'm like, buddy, there's no falsification. The same amount of people voted for the senators. They just didn't want you. Like, that's really what it is. 2 senators have the lead in Georgia that are Republican. Just enough Republicans decided, I really don't want Trump anymore representing my country. And that's like what's been so interesting as you kind of look at how the races kind of unfolded. Because the Republicans actually did pretty well in state Senate, state legislatures, national legislation in Congress. But a lot of people just said, like, look, Trump is a maniac, and then he just goes and proves it. He just proves it. Like, look at me, I'm crazy. And it's just kind of interesting how it all has panned out with that.
So, sorry, Logan, I was just going to ask a question, because I think you just made a great point. Just that, like, people thought there was going to be like a referendum against Trump, but it almost feels like it did happen, just not in the way that people expected it to happen. They thought that everyone was just going to vote blue down the ticket. Yeah. It kind of sounds like, which I think I agree. What you're saying is, no, you had a lot of Republicans kind of through their own discernment say, all right, I'm not giving up my conservative values, but I despise Trump. So I'll live with Biden, but still try to hold on to a Republican Congress.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely.
My interpretation of what happened, though, is that, and maybe this is wrong, but my interpretation of what happened isn't necessarily that a bunch of Republicans choosing to vote for Biden and vote against Trump is what saved this election. It's that a bunch more people from everyone else, all of the people who we knew did not support Trump, there was just way more turnout from those groups of people. So my interpretation of what happened and them expecting this blue wave, I honestly think that they thought they were going to be saved by that, by a bunch of Republicans saying, nope, we're not with this anymore. We're going to rebuke this and say we don't want this. But I think they put, as people often do, way too much faith in white America. People put way too much faith in white America and thinking that eventually they will learn and they'll rise above and they'll see themselves for who they are and what they've done in the past. And that is not what happened. What happened was everybody else just turned out in record numbers, and that's what flipped all these places. And really, and to me, that's the identifying mark about this election.
Because what Michael Bavaro said on the Daily for the New York Times, he said, if you were, people would like to think, now that I'm reviewing, if you were to include the votes that Biden got into 2016, Hillary wins. But if you keep those votes and then add the ones that Trump gained, he still loses in 2016. And so it's kind of scary to think that many people still wanted Trump. And like it's still a positive thing that that many people turned out for Democrats, but Trumpism is clearly still a very relevant piece in the GOP, and that's still pretty scary to think about.
Mike, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I mean, all great thoughts. I'll just add a serious point, and then I'll probably end with the somewhat more petty point. But I think that if you really look at the map, how it's played out now, and I mean, this is not really groundbreaking, but if were we not to be in the pandemic, I mean, Trump would have just gotten blown out on election night. He would have got trounced. I mean, he lost, a bunch of those swing states, which he won in 2016 by a pretty significant margin. Definitely outside of a recount being meaningful margin. And so simply because of the fact that there were so many more mail-in ballots, and he basically, his messaging was to make his voting base distrustful of mail-in ballots. So, I mean, he could have gotten more, people to vote for him if they didn't think that these wild conspiracies that he was, proliferating weren't true. But that they were concerned of showing up in person on election day or whatever. So I think, ultimately it's really good to see the sort of very significant rejection of Trump. Yeah, he did. I mean, he got a lot of votes, so, just under 72 million votes. I mean, that's a lot of people. That's a scary amount of people. But to Esther's point, I think the turnout was just, so great. Now, as it pertains to how it didn't really carry over in some key Senate races, and I thought like Maine in particular was really disappointing. A lot of the other ones I wasn't really that confident about, with the exception of maybe North Carolina. I thought Tom Tillis might have been in trouble. But the fact that Joe Biden won Maine statewide by 8 points, and then Susan Collins kept her seat by about 8 points. It was just kind of weird. Particularly, there was a lot of money put into that race, and there was a really impressive candidate in Sarah Gideon up against her. And for whatever reason, there just seemed to be a disconnect. And Collins has been one of those very public flip-floppers that people have been exasperated with. So the fact that she was able to hold on to her seat was a bit surprising to me, I'll be honest. States like South Carolina and Kentucky, those are firm red states. And as much as I, was dreaming that Jamie Harrison could send Lindsey Graham home, it just wasn't a good map demographic for us. It just, Jamie Harrison and really any other state heads up with Lindsey Graham, north of that red belt would have really been competitive, So one of the things that's concerning is, I don't know, I thought that the Senate Democrats, in particular during the Barrett confirmation hearings, did a pretty good job of trying to make the case to the American people that, hey, this is healthcare is what this is really about. They're wanting to make this about, Roe v. Wade, and that's part of it. But healthcare and the ACA is really on the chopping block. And that didn't seem to resonate with as many people as I would have hoped, because we could very well be in the position where we find out some months from now that the Supreme Court has voted to, invalidate the ACA altogether. And if we don't win these 2 runoffs in Georgia, which, I'm trying to be as hopeful as possible, but it's going to be very difficult to win both of those. And if that doesn't happen, then for at least 2 more years, Mitch McConnell's the Senate Majority Leader, and nothing's going to get done. It's just, just nothing. Absolutely nothing's going to get done. There's not going to be any compromising. We can't put our faith in Mitch McConnell at all. So that's definitely the downside part of it that, I think Democrats have to figure out how to do better down ticket. Because there could even be some folks who voted and then just said, I'm just showing up to vote for president, and just turned in their ballot and didn't even vote in some of those down ballot races because it was really so much about getting rid of Trump, which is a good rallying cry for Biden, obviously. But I don't know that Chuck Schumer and Pelosi were able to help make the case for how their candidates were connected to that and why they were needed as well. And so the other quick thing I'll say is just like, I'm just like really enjoying Trump's meltdown, like every second of it. Like I'm refreshing his Twitter. Like I want to bask in meltdown, bro. Like it's just so beautiful. It just proves everything that we've been saying about him for the past 4 years. It's just like, Fox News and these like wild interviews they're having with, anonymous poll workers. And it's just like, it's all so hilarious to me, bro. And at the end of the day, that dude's going to get up out of there. Like there are these weird reports that he's going to barricade himself in the Oval Office. Or whatever the case may be. That'll last about 4 hours. He'll get hungry and this dude will order some McDonald's or something and he'll come out. So like, it's just not going to happen, And it's just like, it's beautiful. And it's just like all these people who put their faith in this man. I don't know. It's really bizarre to see people like really buy into this idea. Like what he's going to overturn results in like 7 states so that it's not possible, bro. Like he lost bad, very, very bad. And I'm excited. And I love how he's acting. It's beautiful.
It's literally like I wake up in the morning and I go to the bathroom or whatever. And then I'm like, what's Trump saying on Twitter? Like, that's like part of my routine for the last week because I just like watching him explode in the morning. He gets so – and he's about 3 hours ahead of me. So it's always just really enjoyable. And it's what's funny, he talks about voter fraud, but like Georgia is the state of voter suppression the last decade. They love to make sure black people can't vote in their state. You think they wouldn't be crying voter fraud if there was actually some amount of voter fraud? They'd be the first ones to be like, yo, they took our state. It's, Trump won it. Literally Republican AG was like, yeah, we found no real link to any true voter fraud in our state. It's almost like he was sad when he said it because it's like he wanted to go for Trump, and it's just like, bro, you don't even have. And that's the thing is, I've asked so many people, I'm like, where's the proof of this? And they're like, you just got to wait and see. And I tweeted about it yesterday, and it was very petty, but it's always funny when you see someone on Facebook and they're like, yeah, there's mass voter fraud. Just do your research. And I'm like, did you even finish that GED you were working on a few years back? What? How are you? I mean, these are hometown focus. I'm just kind of giggling because it's like, bro, I'm fine. I'm fine with a good trail or false flag or conspiracy or whatever. But you gotta give me something other than a guy throwing empty boxes into a UPS truck. Did y'all saw that video you sent? Put that in the chat where they had the Esther. You sent it in the chat today. The woman on Fox News had disguised her voice and her face, and she was like, "I was in a walk in the parking lot." and there was a Biden van, and they were filling out ballots. And I'm like, you really think that there's a Biden van? They're like, hey, will you help us? We're trying to fake some ballots here. Oh, you're on your lunch break? Like, it's just like this idea that people think we're dumb enough to believe that a Joe Biden van was falsifying ballots in the parking lot of a polling location. Like, you wouldn't even see that in a church board meeting. Like, that's like, like, it's just hilarious. The white people that are so scared of other people seeing something like progressive that it's just like they've fabricated these stories. And then like the some white people that might actually like have attended a college at any point in their life, they're like, let's just wait and see what the results look like. I'm like, we did that. It happened on Saturday, if you weren't aware, and the media reported it, and your beloved Fox News even reported it. Yeah. And said like, yo, our boy lost, but let's spend the next week trying to convince people that he actually won. Because it's just
crazy, bro.
It's also like there's so many logistics that you would have to hurdle through to commit voter fraud. Like 4 people in a parking lot filling out a bunch of ballots, so they're coming up with a new signature and name for every single one. Like what's going on there? Thinking. Or like, okay, so let's say these are already done, right? They're already signed, so they're ripping open the envelopes to fill them in. How are they resealing the envelopes? Like, there's so many different logistics that you'd have to go through. You can't stand in a parking lot and do it. You'd have to have a very well thought out and thorough strategic plan that would have to involve lots of different people in order to get this done. Like, it really does not make sense. And it's also like, I don't know, like, we elected Barack Obama, okay? Like, the United States of America elected Barack Obama, okay? And what is this? 8 years later now? Yes, 8 years later now since his second re-election, even more people turn out, even more people show up to the polls to vote. And you don't think it's believable that we can elect Joe Biden? Like he makes, like, if you're looking at America as what America is and what it has always been, you don't think it's believable that Joe Biden was
an old white man?
You don't think that's believable? Obama won already. You don't think that this makes just logical sense? Like, it's just the denial is so
go look at those pictures of all the presidents and see which one Joe Biden looks like.
Literally. He looks like 45 of them. And the idea that Rudy Giuliani is like burying the lead on the evidence he has for voter suppression is like the most hilarious part of this, bro. Like, oh, just wait till we get in court. Like, bro, if you had some really, ironclad, hard evidence of voter suppression, or not voters, well, we got evidence of voter suppression, but of voter fraud, they'd be screaming it from the rooftops, bro. Like, they're like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they'd be all over it. And it was so funny watching their little press conference at the Four Seasons landscaping spot.
Oh my!
It was just the perfect like icing on the cake for these 4 years, bro. Like, is this like a scene out of Curb Your Enthusiasm? Like Larry David wouldn't have thought of it, bro.
Can we get a picture of the press conference up real quick?
I'll pull it up.
Also, a picture of Rudy Giuliani in the Borat movie. Like, it's the same guy. The same guy that got scammed by a fake Borat reporter. Like, if you haven't seen Borat, don't watch it because it's literally so terrible.
No, it's a waste of time. Fast forward to the end. Yeah, that's when the Giuliani joint happens.
The first 20 minutes were kind of funny, and then the Giuliani part. And the Giuliani part's only funny because this is the guy that thinks he's going to, like, uncover him and, like, Barr, they're going to uncover mass voter fraud. And I'm like, y'all can't even, like, uncover that a fake news reporter is trying to give you something to put on a movie. Like,
and what's sad is people that are waiting for this, like, whole thing to flip for Trump. You see people on Twitter like retweeting or reposting things that like a lawyer is doing or that Barr is doing. And like, they're all just a bunch of nothing burgers, right? Like Barr, like, it's like, oh, Bill Barr does X, Y, Z. Here's the picture here. This really, really sad. Like in the end,
Oh man.
Yo, that's my uncle on the left, I think.
all Barr is doing is giving people the opportunity to investigate fraud. So it's like you're doing something that the DOJ already gave you the permission to do, right? But like for someone on Twitter that's desperate for a Trump win, they see that and like they just go out of control and excitement. Like this is huge. Like some big thing is going to come out of it. And Trump right now, Trump is 0 for 10 with his lawsuits, right?
He's 12.
0 for 12 now. And so when people are like, you're not paying attention, Trump has all these lawsuits, and we're like, no, we are paying attention. That's why we're telling you this is insane, because he hasn't won a lawsuit yet. So it's like, what? So what is happening when these lawsuits are being brought to court? Some of these judges, you can tell, are getting very annoyed. You got lawyers saying things like, the judge will ask, did you have poll watchers that were Republicans? And the lawyer will say, what did he say? Like we
have a non-zero number.
What does that mean? Like, so you have poll watchers? Like what? And this is going to be my intro. John Oliver did an episode on this where he broke down so many different examples where one judge literally said enough with the BS. Did you guys have poll watchers there? And the lawyer had to answer yes. So the judge literally was like, so what's the problem? Like, it's like, what are we doing? This is a waste of time. Like, I could be in my bed sleeping right now. Y'all got me on these Zoom calls doing these accusations. It's just like, it is sad to see how these political strategies are creating these just fake realities for so many people. Like the New York Times just posted this on their Twitter account about like how people are leaving Facebook and Twitter and going to other social media websites because they hate the fact that they're being censored. When it's like, can you at least try to consider a possibility that you're not being censored? But in fact, what you are trying to say or tweet is just not true. Like, people are mad. Like, look at the big tech controlling Trump. It's like, yeah, they're not flagging Biden's tweets because Biden don't be tweeting crazy stuff. Like, it's not. It's so sad
to think that big tech companies are on the side of progressives.
They want to tax you. Like, what are we talking about? People aren't thinking. They're not thinking, yo.
So this new social media site that a lot of Republicans are migrating to, which Asian just mentioned, is called Parlor. And I remember the founder or someone involved in higher leadership on Parlor was being interviewed on NPR. And he was essentially saying, we want to create a space for unbiased social media. People's voices are being silenced. People are not able to say what they want to say. There's no freedom of speech. But I think this is the issue. The issue now is that truth is, and since Trump has come in more and more so, truth has become partisan when it shouldn't be. Yeah. Truth has become associated with the party. And that's dangerous because now we see that individuals are creating spaces to essentially function as gigantic echo chambers. If you don't like the truth, you just run away. You find a corner with some other people with tinfoil hats, and then you guys play tic-tac-toe while writing crazy conspiracy theories on a chalkboard. And But the issue in that is that this is dangerous is because our country is becoming more and more segmented. So I can't even challenge an untruth.
Yeah,
you're saying Twitter's not censoring Trump in the way that Trump thinks and his supporters think that he is, and Facebook isn't either. They're challenging what he's saying, and they're making it clear that what he is saying is being disputed and it may or may not be true. So you need to look into it and figure it out if it's true or not on your own. And I think that's why when people talk censorship, a lot of times now it's just individuals saying, you're not letting me say what I want to say. Like, no, we're just challenging what you're saying, and you need to back up your words with proof.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny that I was just gonna say with the social media, they did that. They've done that many times. 8chan was one of them and it always just ends up being
Yik yak.
like far right propaganda to be racist. Like that's all it ends up being is like it just ends up a place for white supremacy to like continue to exist. And they're like, we're unfiltered. Like, y'all are just mad racist. Like, and it's so funny. And if anyone wants a good example of this, like you can go to my page. I've got some conspiracy theorists on there that'll literally drop like a link of something on some of my comments. Anyone listening, go to my page and check it out. They'll drop a link of something and then someone will respond with debunking that link and they'll be like, oh, you believe the media? And I'm like, no, we just believe that this didn't exist. Like it doesn't happen. Like it's just hilarious. And so people think they want their echo chamber. And it's like, you just want to be racist? Like you just want to hate people and like get a little affirmation. It's like, yeah, like I could call, people what I want over here, the N-word. And it's like, people are going to get there and be like, this isn't really what I wanted. Like I didn't want to be. And it's like, it's what you're going to get. You're going to get a bunch of terrible people in their little think tanks and be like, wow, Logan's Facebook isn't so bad now because, he doesn't vocally call people the N-word to their faces or in a comment section. Like, it's just ridiculous. But
and to your point, Jordan, when you said like becoming partisan, when there have been a couple of people on Fox News that have called Trump out or his press secretary Kelly, I can't remember, Kellyanne something. And when you read the comment section, it's full of people saying things like, you sold out to the left, you've been bought to the left, your ratings are low, and so you're trying to pull in liberals. But it's like, what? I don't know how we come back from something like this where it's like, there it is, where it's like, I don't know how to present truth to people that think that everything is just like subjective now, right? Where, we talked about this last week. What happens when the courts don't help you all win the election? What happens when Trump doesn't win? What happens when the New York Times interviews elected officials, Democrats and Republicans, literally in every single state, and they all say that there was no massive voter fraud? What happens to your narrative then? Do you leave Breitbart? Do you leave Fox? Do you go to Reddit? Do you just keep going lower and seclude yourself more and more and more so that you can just keep desperately trying to find someone that will say what you want to hear? Well, how far can you go? How far would you go until you're literally not in reality anymore, where you won't trust anyone? Like it was crazy to see how much they quickly turned on Fox when they called Arizona during the election week. Mm-hmm. But when you off right now, a lot of analysts are saying it looks like Fox and Associated Press were correct in their call. It does not look like Trump will be able to get Arizona. And so it's like, well, help me out here. I truly would like to know from a conservative, how far are you willing to go to not consider the possibility that your party is on the wrong side of history right now? Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think they're willing to answer or even consider that question.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any. I don't think we're getting that group of people back. I know Biden probably has to at least put up the appearance that he's going to try. That's why when he was tweeting things about unifying the country, etc., I was not offended by that. I understand, like, you are the president of everybody. You do at least have to say you're going to try, but I don't think that we should spend too much energy trying to draw that group of people back in. I think we just have to let them go to their corner, wherever they need to go to feel safe. And we're supposed to move on without them and keep pushing, because they're not coming back. I think they're gone for good.
They lost.
They're not coming back.
Mike, were you going to say something?
No, I'm gonna jump. No.
Oh man, there's a lot of hard hitting questions in the comments. I'm gonna throw it probably to Logan to get to some of those, but before he does that, I think it's just really bizarre. My thing with the legal challenges, and I think I texted this to y'all the other day. Like up here in Michigan, they tried to file an appeal because, of course, they lost in the lower court to the Michigan Court of Appeals, and their filing was defective because they didn't make the right copies. And it's just like,
my Lord,
bro, you don't even have to go to law school to know that you have to make copies for the other side. Like, what are y'all like? Come on, man! Like, what is y'all doing? Like, it's just really, really sad, bro. It's sad that he can't even find competent enough attorneys to do just like paperwork properly, and so I think that for folks who I guess there maybe is some biblical support for this. I'm not the theologian on here, so I don't know where it's found, but the Bible does talk about where people's ears will be tickled by just what they want to hear. Essentially, that's the Michael paraphrase version, and so like. I think that we are seeing large numbers of people who have bought into this idea, whether it's for like last days prophecy reasons, because there are a lot of people who I've even heard, and we've heard some of this in our church, where people are like, yeah, Trump is not, I don't like a lot of the stuff that he does, but I feel like him being in presidency is going to usher in the last days, which will lead to the second coming. And there's this like weird idea sometimes in religion and Christianity that Jesus needs us to do something in order for him to come back. Like, oh yeah, I was waiting for y'all to vote for that fascist leader so that I could come back and save everybody. It's just like, that's not how scripture works. That's not how God works, and he's not, he's not waiting on us to provide him some opportunity or avenue to do what it is that he's planning to do. No person knows the daytime or the hour. So I think religious folks just need to give that whole eschatological argument up. That's just not how this works at all. And stop thinking that the way that you're voting is going to, push God into some sort of corner where he has to do something that he wasn't already intending or planning on doing. So, but beside that, people have also bought into this narrative or this idea, and evangelical right wingers have really fed this for a while, that the government is another wing or another avenue for them to spread the gospel and their version of what that looks like, and to mandate these, Judeo-Christian values that they talk about a lot. And so people like Trump, as the Russians call them, he's the useful idiot. And so they could use him to get what they want, to get the Supreme Court justices they want, whatever the case may be, irrespective of who he is as a person. And so because of the fact that they've sold themselves out to this idea that God has ordained them to vote for the Republican Party, regardless of what any other person says, regardless of what the Christless, soulless liberals say, because that's, how we're all labeled, I'm just going to do what I have to do, and I'm going to align with this group of people wherever it takes me, wherever it takes me on social media, wherever it takes me in the ballot box, wherever it takes me in my crazy sounding church, where people are, laughing about the fact that the media called, Biden the winner. And it's just like, no, everybody's laughing at you guys because you guys are just morons. But a lot of those people, this just goes back. I mean, they've been born into and shaped by this. It doesn't actually even have that much to do with Trump for some of those folks. Yeah, 80% of white evangelicals voted for Trump, but they would have voted for any other person who ran in Trump's stead as well. You do have a lot of people who love what Trump stands for and represents, and they'll follow him anywhere. But for most of those people, most of those 71, almost 72 million people now, I think they see Trump as a means to an end. And I think for the vast majority of them, sadly, you're probably not getting them back from what they've sold themselves out to.
Yeah.
I also think what has been revealed in watching the way Christians and evangelicals have talked about this election is just how narrow their understanding of God is. Like, they really only think about God in this very narrow American sense. Like, they view God as being an American God.
Yeah.
Like the way that they talk. I saw some video floating around of this woman praying very passionately after, I guess they got I don't know, this was recently after they got the news about Biden being in the lead. And so she did this very passionate prayer, basically like begging God to change it and listing all these reasons why she thinks he should. And she was saying things like, there's only one man running who is pro-cops and pro-troops. God, you are pro-cop. You are pro-troops. I know, it's saying things like that. And I'm like, what kind of understanding do you have to have of God to think that he is going to, if you really think God is going to come in and take a side, which I honestly think, if we understand God as being as universal as he is, he's not taking sides, y'all. He loves us all, okay? He's not taking sides. But if you're really going to try to say like he is taking sides in this, what makes you think that he would be pro-American troops who by definition are given the duty to go into the world and essentially kill other people, regardless of whether you think the motives, whatever you think about them? We know if you have an understanding of God that is global, that understands that God is caring equally about all of humanity, that thinking doesn't make sense. It just goes to show how all of the ways that we have been taught to think about God as male, as seeing Jesus as white, all of these things are conflating right now with how we view him and American politics. And it's so narrow. That's why I think it's so crucial. You can have all the conversations you want about how it doesn't matter what Jesus looks like, doesn't matter what God looks like, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe it doesn't, but it is definitely important to try to expand how you imagine God. Like, imagine him beyond the bounds of gender. Imagine him beyond the bounds of ethnicity and race that we have been taught to think of him within, because that will change. You can't have this conversation the same way if you do that. Yeah. But it just is so clear that people and American Christians have been taught to think about God as being an American God that is essentially throwing the rest of the world away, apparently, because he doesn't care what we do to them. It's crazy.
Yeah, really interesting. So a lot of people, like in my circles, you know, and not necessarily in my circles, it's actually been interesting. I've dialogued with people because people have actually asked me, like, why do you still have Trump supporters on your Facebook and like different things? And like, I'm gonna be honest, I don't really use Facebook for friend connections. I use Facebook to talk to like my mom and like make a funny status now and then. And honestly, for the last 2 weeks, I've just been using Facebook to trigger Trump voters. No offense if you're a Trump voter. I've just found your reactions to be quite humorous for myself. And me personally, I'm pretty lonely in California. But a lot of people really push back on the hatred of Donald Trump. Not people, white people. A lot of white people really push back. And as we've said, so if I have anything in my friends list, it's white evangelical Christians. Like, that's who I have. If they're non-black people, it's white evangelical Christians. And they all seem to love Trump. And like the few white people that don't, they kind of get, you know, what it is. But like, I just kind of wanted to throw a lob up to y'all. And I know it could be hit or miss on who listens to this, but like, what would you say to, you know, white evangelicals that believe that Trump is pro-church, he's pro-life, he's pro some of these things, but also these claims that he's really been reiterating time and time and time again that he's the best thing for Black America since Abraham Lincoln. You know, I hear this from white people a lot that I would consider to have very, very, very few and limited experiences with Black people, to hear from, you know, some Black voices to say like, look, this is why I found some of these things about Donald Trump to be so problematic. Even though Biden may have had some of his issues, like I'd really love a perspective to just kind of maybe be able to give to some people, like, why do you think white people have found this so appealing? And what would you say to them if they were happening to listen, to be like, this is kind of why I think you're not really listening to other people when they're talking?
So I just want to, oh, sorry, Esther, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I was just going to say, I mean, first thing I would say honestly is, even if it was true that Trump was the best thing to happen to Black people since Abraham Lincoln, I think we really need to pause just for a second and think about what a low bar that is. Let's just really, like, let's settle on that for a second.
Yeah.
He made it so that we were humans. Like that was the bar for Lincoln. It was like, okay, you were subhuman, now you're at least human-ish, like in the eyes of the law, kind of. Like that's what happened. So that's like such a low bar to even say that. So you don't like you. That's one thing. But then two, I guess I would just have more questions for them. Besides Trump saying that out loud, what makes you think that, A? And B, what makes you think that Trump is the authoritative voice on what's best for us?
Right.
You should be listening to us on what is best for us. If Black people are telling you, no, Trump's not the best thing to happen to Black people, then maybe you should take our word for it over his, because why do you feel like he would know? I would just have a lot of questions. I think that's one of those conversations that for me would just have to be had with, somebody has to be prodding your own thoughts on this. And I think you need to, through that conversation, hopefully start to see the own holes in your own thinking. Like, because it's clear having these conversations about statistics and all this, I'm not going to go through history and prove which president did the most for Black people. I think that's a disgusting take. That's just a disgusting take, period. Because we know that white supremacy has always lived in the White House. None of them have been great for us. So I don't think that's the path I would go on. I hated seeing that happen in the debates. I think it's just an ugly conversation to have. Yeah. The conversation really just needs to be, what makes you think that is the voice on this? Why does he get to make that statement? You should be listening to us. The problem is you don't hold our voices in high regard because you have been impacted by white supremacist ideas. And so you are looking for somebody else to validate those ideas. And that's all that this is. Yeah. And if you do enough self interrogation, you have to come to terms with that.
But I also think, like you touched on, I don't know if the white voters who are voting for Trump, if they believe in the intelligence of Black voters. I don't know if they believe that Black people know what's best for them, because I don't know if they have truly reconciled with the idea that a Black person is their equal human. I've seen a lot of people, well, not anymore because I blocked them on Facebook, but I've seen a number of people try to throw in like some stats of like what Trump did to minorities. Like they like try to throw that word around a lot. And so you can try to respond to them like, hey, unemployment amongst African Americans and Hispanics was declining during Obama's year. You can try to you can talk statistics out the wall, but when it comes down to it, when you try to explain to them why Trump isn't good for African Americans, and you try to say, here's why I say that: he's racist, he's homophobic, he's xenophobic, their immediate response is always going to be, name one thing that Trump did that was racist. Give me an example of a racist thing that Trump has done. And so they are already entering into the conversation wanting to poke holes in what they believe is a myth known as systemic racism or white supremacy. They are not entering into the conversation for you to truly prove them wrong. They're entering into the conversation to solidify their stance that they have chosen the right hero. And that is where you realize, I don't know if some of these white Americans are even interested in considering the possibility of a truly concerning problem in racism in politics, because I don't think they even acknowledge its existence. And so when I see them respond that way, you can see it even condescending, where they are in some ways looking at you and saying, you don't even know what's good for you. You're brainwashed by the liberal media, and it really disrespects in many aspects the amount of process that we go through when we choose the candidate who we're going to vote for. Like, you are insulting our intelligence by you telling me that Trump is good for me, when you don't think to realize that I have spent time on my own. I've wrestled with who I was going to vote for. I've truly thought this through. I've had tough conversations with my wife. I've had tough conversations with my friends here. We've had tough conversations with people in the comments. Like, Mike Miller was not even a huge fan of Biden. Like, we've wrestled with these thoughts. And for you to then throw that back at us and say, you don't know what's good for you, Trump has been helping minorities. It's like, well, how low do you think my intelligence level is? And that, I think, still feeds into the fact that you to yourself are wrestling with racism. Because if you can't see it, how do you expect to tell us what's good for us? And that, I don't know how to even enter into that conversation, because you got racists telling a black person that a racist is good for him. So it's like, you're blind leading the blind here. I don't know what to do there.
Yeah, make it make sense. No, that's really good. And I'll just add some more to that. So, I mean, well, the first quick thing that I would say is, like, you're likely talking to a person who maybe has recognized racism for the first time, like a couple months ago when George Floyd got killed. And so it's like, you're going to talk to me about, like, what's good for black people when it took somebody being choked out for like almost 9 minutes for you to think, oh man, maybe something weird is going on out here. Maybe what they've been talking about, maybe there's something to it, you know? Yeah. The first thing that I would say to them is I don't think that they really understand, I'd say so maybe I'll speak for myself, but I think it would, most black people would resonate regardless of where you fell on, like, the political spectrum. When Barack Obama got elected president, that really meant something. Like, it meant a heck of a lot. And Trump has been, and this is even before he got elected, Trump has represented the chief face of discrediting and demeaning Barack Obama. Starting with the birtherism stuff. You realize that Donald Trump didn't acknowledge that Barack Obama was born in America until after he was elected president?
Yeah.
Don't you realize that? It's just like someone who was elected president in this country for 2 terms, for white evangelical Christians to align themselves with someone who would not validate the humanity of someone who means so much to us, is something that I personally will never forget.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it. And the fact that after the 4 years of what we've seen from this guy, for 80% of them to again align themselves with him, I'm never going to forget that. I'm sorry. And it's just, it's really difficult because you really wonder, like, what Bible are these people reading? Like, and I try not to make, like, moral judgments of other people, but I'm just really confused, man. I'm not like a Bible scholar or anything, but I read about this person named Jesus who you claim to follow and who he was and what he represented. and what he did and what he said and his way of being. And if I were to like do like a creative player, like I'm on a video game, and I wanted to create someone who was the exact opposite of that, I would create Donald Trump. In every way, he embodies the exact antithesis of who Christ was and who Christ is. I mean, he openly admitted the fact that he's never asked for forgiveness. I've never had a need to be forgiven. He couldn't name a Bible verse of his that's his favorite, but he's the most devout Christian of all time, according to him. Just like he's the most non-racist person in any room that he's in. He loves saying that as well. I mean, I could go on and on and on, and we need 30 more shows for me to talk about all the different ways that this man has represented something that's completely opposite to what Black people need, to what Black Christian people need. And I think for us, particularly in Black culture, even for folks who aren't like super connected to the church, we're a very religious people. We're very, spirituality is important to us, and genuineness is important to us. And when you have someone who's making a mockery of religion and spirituality, when you have someone who is just a serial pathological liar, and then when you also have someone who there's just clear evidence of his blatant racism, and there's evidence in things that he said since then of that racism. What I've often said to white evangelicals is that, I don't necessarily know if you voting for Donald Trump means that you're a racist. It might be, some evidence for the case. But at the very least, it means that racism is not a problem for you. It's not a deal breaker for you at all. It's not that big a deal. And so, you finally being able to say the word Black Lives Matter like 6 years later doesn't really mean that much to me when you walk into the booth and for whatever half-baked reasons you have, you pull the lever for Donald Trump again. And then another quick word just for, in particular, these white Christians who put themselves out as allies, but are, insistent on talking about this whole both sidesism of, oh, I'm just so torn. And, well, Donald Trump is like this, but, Biden's like that. And it's the same thing they did in 2016. It's this both sidesism nonsense. Yeah. And it's just as bad as your most blatant racist Trump supporter. It's what King talks about as the dilemma of the white moderate, which is more dangerous than the Ku Klux Klanner. So your Facebook statuses of you, waxing eloquent about how there's good people on both sides and bad people on both sides. I don't want to hear it. It's worthless to me, and I don't want to read your blogs about it. The difference between these two candidates couldn't have been more clear. I'm sorry. It just couldn't have been more clear. And it couldn't have been more clear in 2016 either. And I don't care who feels a way about that, but you all chose your nationalized white supremacist view of Christ and Christianity and hid behind your half-baked reasons for that, and I'll never forget it.
Real quick, I'm sorry, go ahead, Gordon.
Yeah, so I just want to say real quick that white people's life expectancy since 2010 has declined dramatically. It's rather either stopped completely or it's reversed. And it's because of things like the opioid crisis, so drug overdoses, alcoholism, liver disease, and suicides. And then on top of that, white people are hearing from all directions that there is so much in this country that is going wrong that's their fault. And they're also hearing none of their concerns being heard. They feel like no one cares about what they're going through day to day. I'm talking about poor white people in particular. And as a Black man, I have to say, and I would say maybe a lot of other Black people would agree with me, we know how that feels. We know what it feels like to not be listened to, and we know what it feels like when it seems as if everyone around you does not care So you have a choice, and that choice is, are you going to join us, people that are struggling in a similar way that you feel like you're struggling now? Are you going to join us? Are you going to itch that scratch in the back of your brain that makes it seem as if that just tells you that there's something wrong, that there's something amiss in America, and that you can't put your finger on? But we can tell you what it is. It's systemic racism. And that itch can be scratched if you join us and if you help us fix it. But you have to help us.
Yeah.
You have a part in this that you have to play. And the longer that you run away from this responsibility, the worse you're going to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And the more scared you're going to be when you see the America around you change to be more black and brown. And you're going to feel yourself become smaller and smaller and smaller. But what's the good news is that we don't want revenge on y'all. Y'all treat us poorly, but we have open arms. We're like, if you want to work with us to make a better America, then come and join us. Do that with us. We don't want revenge on y'all. So you have to understand that you don't have to accept racism to get the America that you want. You don't have to accept Donald Trump. You deserve better than him.
Yeah.
And with us, and we can make America a better place. But the longer you ignore it, the worse things are going to get for everybody.
Yeah,
that's a word. That's good.
I have a couple thoughts. First, I just want to say quick in response to what Nix was saying earlier about how evangelicals can ban over Trump so much, seeing how he is so antithetical to everything that we believe and understand as Christians. I had that same question too until we watched this really good documentary series called The Family on Netflix. And they essentially painted this picture about how the worse that he is, the more proof it is that God can use anyone and anything to achieve his ideals. And so him doing bad things just continues to prove their idea of what it looks like when God is great and amazing and can use anyone and turn any situation to his benefit, essentially. But I also want to say, in response to what you were saying, Jordan, you just made me think about something that I've been thinking a lot about recently. I don't know. So there's this theory called the boomerang theory about the Holocaust. And it's essentially this theory. I can't remember the name of the philosopher's name, but this philosopher wrote this essay essentially making the argument that colonialism and what happened when Europe colonized Africa and the brutality that they modeled there was essentially a precursor to that same brutality that we saw in the Holocaust, saying basically your actions and how you have modeled things to be handled elsewhere in the world, you can only contain that for so long. And eventually that same idea and violence that you have modeled in other places is going to come back and it's going to hit you in your own backyard. And I've been thinking about that a lot when we think about the things that are happening in white America right now, thinking about things like, well, when for decades, right, when the Black community was seen as a threat, was seen as something that needed to be tackled and taken down, what happened? They flooded our communities with drugs. And now we are seeing in their own communities, they are being, that same thing is happening. They are being victimized by a powerful group of people that can benefit from them being addicted to drugs. That is what's happening. I think about it the same thing when you talk about mass shootings. For decades, when white people felt threatened, when they felt that their position in society was being threatened because Black people were achieving levels of success and equality that they didn't like, what did they do? They went out and they murdered people in mass. They murdered Black people in mass. Tulsa wasn't the only one. We know it happened all over the country. And we're seeing that same mentality happen now. When a white man feels threatened for whatever reason, whether it has something to do with a societal pressure that he's dealing with, or it has something to, if he's being bullied in school, etc. What are we seeing happen? They're using methods that were modeled for decades, but now it's coming back and it's happening within their own community. I think that before white America can join us in this fight that you're talking about, Jordan, and be a part of this push to make everything better, because we know and understand, yes, This push that we are making for equality is going to benefit everybody. We know that. But I think before white people can join in that, white people have to reconcile with their own history and their own past, and how that same boomerang theory is living and breathing right now in their own community. You guys taught yourselves these tactics. You taught yourselves that this is what you do when you feel threatened. This is what you do when things are not going the way that you want. And you can only contain that for so long. At a certain point, it's going to flood back into your own community and impact you too. And you have to reconcile with that. And you have to understand that before you can move forward in any progressive direction. And that's why it's very frustrating to see time and time again, white people putting faith in white people, believing that white people are going to make these moral progressive decisions because we've seen what could happen with Trump and we've seen how bad and ugly it gets. That's not going to happen until at a large scale, they reconcile with their own history. We have been doing that forever because we haven't had the option not to. In order to survive and live, we have to consistently reconcile with the violence that has occurred to us in our own history, so that we can understand what's happening now, so that we can plan for how to make it better and move forward. That's been our fight and our story since we got here. White people have to do that same work. You have to understand your own history and how you got to this point before you can start planning and pushing forward. But they're so resistant to doing that. And so I hope that we see that shift happen. I think that would be amazing. But I am very skeptical because I personally do not have faith in white America's ability to be that self-reflective.
And I would just want to add on, I think you touched on something, Jordan, and I think Esther kind of saw that go further. We've seen this tactic before where at its core, racism is a tool that the powerful use to keep their power, right? And so when you see the Civil War take place, you had a lot of poor whites feeling threatened because they feel like the government is coming to take their state rights, right? That is the lie that the powerful told the poor white American demographic, and they bought into it, right? And so what Esther's saying that I think is very profound is these people who you think are your friend are hurting you as well to sustain their power. This is not something that is benefiting you. But what people in power have taught you is that the progress that the other side is fighting for will hurt you in the end. That is why when you hear people talk about things like the Green New Deal, the Affordable Care Act, restorative justice, police reform, anything that would bring forth some resemblance of equity to tackle housing. Like there was like 20 mayors sign on to this letter to say, if you really want to deal with systemic racism, you have to deal with housing, right? But once these progressive ideas hit the larger conversation, you have this other side who they know could eventually lose power if these things are brought to light. And so they fuel their base with the idea that once this happens, your lives will be in jeopardy. And I think you can tie that to why so many people on the right increased their voter turnout, where you were to ask anyone if it was on the left or the right, both sides thought that this election was an existential threat to the future of our country. And when you listen to some of the poor white Americans, the future country that they have been in some ways hoodwinked into believing is one that is based on a future where their lives will be harmed, where their lives are in jeopardy, where their rights will be taken away. Will they, they're going to be thrown into jail by authoritative government. And you see this pattern happen over and over and over again, where these people in power see that this working white class these poor white Americans are ones that we have to keep our hold on, because once we lose them, then we have no base to perpetuate our power. I think when I hear that, I think of like the Black Panther Party and how, you know, they talked about putting together a rainbow coalition and how it wasn't just Black people who they were helping. There were Hispanics there. There were white poor people there. And you saw the way that the powerful in America reacted to it. They quickly labeled them as a terrorist organization because they saw what it truly looked like when the powerless finally came together to fight against the powerful. And that, I think, is where it really comes down to. The poor white American demographic, they, like Esther is saying, you have to recognize with your own history. But I would also add that you have to recognize how racism against Black people is also hurting you. It's not something that's just hurting and keeping us back. It's keeping you back. Like, your lives are not getting better. These things that you think are going to protect America, if they were implemented, these things that you think are going to destroy our democracy if they were implemented, are things that would end up helping you. We see the perfect example in the Affordable Care Act. Majority of the people on the ACA right now are poor white Americans. And yet for some reason, they despise the idea of Obamacare to their core, even though you'll hear stories of people in places like Kentucky where they'll say, Obamacare saved my life, or Obamacare saved my son's life, or my husband's life, or my grandfather's life. And it's in these efforts where you have to realize that the fight for equity is something that can also benefit your life as well.
No, that's really good. Especially that final thought. I think white people don't realize, and that's what's funny is I've kind of done that with some of my family, and I really appreciate all of you kind of answering a question not to center the pot around like white people, but white people brought us Trump and they tried to bring us Trump again. And I feel like is what frustrates me is like a lot of white people they like Trump because he resonates to what they've always thought, but they don't realize that their thoughts are harmful to themselves. You know, I know so many people that can't afford healthcare, but they can't stand Bernie Sanders. And I'm like, my friend, the guy wants to give it to you. And they're like, well, I don't want a handout. And it's like, he wants to make it cheaper and more available. And they're like, well, I want to make more money. And I'm like, Joe Biden wants to guarantee that you get a raise by raising the minimum wage in your state and across the nation. And they're like, well, I already make more than 15 an hour. How's that going to raise my wage? And I'm like, I promise it will. Like, I promise that if the bottom is making 15 and you're making 16.25, you're going to get more than, it's just like some of these things, when we talk about basic income and stuff like that, I'm like, these things will benefit you.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the Trump voters, statistically, there are a lot of middle-class Trump voters, but it's really driven by a kind of a poor people's campaign to a degree, uneducated people that buy lies. I mean, that was the thing is they talked about, not to sway away from white people, but it's a great example. Cuban Americans in southern Florida, they said that the Spanish commercials for politicians were regulated differently, and they were able to be more misinformed in Spanish than English commercials. And that's why a lot of Cuban Americans were buying into the communist narrative because they were being fed it. And whether we like how they voted or not is irrelevant. It's the fact that their vote wasn't beneficial to their own existence, whether they just simply believe it was. And I think that misinformation machine, as we're seeing with Trump continuing to spread it, can be so harmful. And it's really sad for me. Like, I'm angry at white people, but I'm also just very sad that they're like so unwilling to see the benefits that some of these things can be to their personal society with policies and things. Now, I do know a lot of wealthy white people that are going to vote red because they think it benefits them regardless. And it may. Some people do make more than $400,000 a year, and some people are going to get hit with taxes. And I understand. some of that, but a lot of the people that are arguing this are not going to ever, you know, when they show the popcorn ceiling, if your ceiling looks like this, stop complaining about Joe Biden's tax plan. Like, it is the old school popcorn 90s ceiling that, you know, you don't want anymore. It's like, if you drive a 87 Buick, stop complaining, or a 92 Honda Civic, stop complaining about Joe Biden's tax plan. Like, it's not going to hurt you, but like, just funny, and disappointing to watch. And it's kind of, you know, similar to how you see minorities voting for Trump. It's like, it's disappointing to watch you vote for someone that you're only voting for them because you're being lied to and you're believing it. And it's kind of sad, honestly. But yeah, just wild. I appreciate y'all's perspective. It was really, really beneficial. I can now send some people to maybe get a better understanding of another side.
If your ceiling looks like this, do not worry about Biden's tax plan.
We're good.
Let that be known. Let that be known. You know, this reminds me of, and it's wild because I think it was when Mike first came to Andrews, and he put on a MLK program. And it's the first time I had heard this, a couple years ago, that when MLK was murdered around that time, that's when he wanted to start organizing, and that's when he created the Poor People's Campaign. And the individuals on top started to become afraid because they started to understand that this game that we've been playing of feeding poor white people into blaming Black and brown people for their problems isn't going to work if someone like MLK says it's about the top, it's about the top and the bottom. If you attack the money, then we can bring everyone up. If we create true equity, then all poor people, Black or brown, are going to benefit from doing this. And this is what we're still dealing with today. They're just these lies, these lies that poor white people are being fed, that one day you can be like Trump. If you work hard enough, you can be as rich as Trump. You can start from the bottom with nothing, absolutely nothing, and you can climb your way up. Even if you have to climb on a couple of heads and backs, you'll get to the top. But that's the lie. That's the lie they've been telling, and that's the lie that people have tried to demystify and have been killed for it.
Yeah, and I think what's sad, I know, I think Esther and I talked about there was that video floating around of a number of retired NFL players, and one of them was talking about the tax that during President Obama's time as president, how he would see that his NFL paychecks were a bit decreased. And then, he went on, the rant to talk about, like, I'm okay with $675,000 instead of $1.2 million, because I know that money is going to be used essentially in an equitable reason. And what was kind of concerning was, like, the body language around the room showed that he was the only one who was truly on board for the true fight for equity, right? Because I think what you have seen, and we talked about it last week with some of the Hispanic and Black male voters who have bought into the capitalist dream of, like, if I work hard enough, I can get to where I am. And if you didn't get to where I am, that means you didn't work hard enough. It's on you. The entire concern is simply about personal accountability. But one of the things that I remember Esther and I talked about was Chad Johnson, and how Chad Johnson, like, he grew up in the hood, right? And he was surrounded by other Black male athletes that played the same games as he did, that went to practice the same times as he did. The real difference is, Chad, you were born with the gift. You were born with the talent that some of your other friends had, that they put in the same amount of work that you did. But
Mhm.
That doesn't mean they're going to run as fast as you can, or run the same routes as well, or catch the pass as well as you can. And so when you refuse to acknowledge that there is a difference there, and then when you become an actual professional athlete and say that y'all just didn't work as hard as me, and therefore I do not have the responsibility of giving some of my hard-earned money to help bring you to where I am, you're failing to see that it wasn't too long ago where you were just where they were. And it's sad where we can say that these, coming of age anomalous stories of that one Black guy that made it out the hood is somehow a testament that the entire racial hierarchy is just dismantled in some way. But what good is it if it's that one guy that makes it out when there are still millions of people that are closer to being homeless than they are to actually being a millionaire? That means that what you're actually accomplishing, you're an anomaly. You're not the new standard now, and I think that is part of the work that perhaps we need to do in our own community, is destroying that myth that we've seen Republicans try to push down many Black and Hispanic, particularly men, saying that, yo, man, if you want the dream that I have, you work hard, you got it too. Because that's a myth. It's just not true.
Mm-hmm. Well, guys, thank you for your thoughts. Do want to obviously give a quick shout out to all the Black women. And I would suggest you look up who helped organize and flipping these states in this election. And of course, shout out to Auntie Kamala. Okay. Everyone practice. January, is it 20th? I want all pronunciations to be correct. Okay. We saying her name right for the next 4 years. Very excited that Auntie Kamala is coming into the White House. History was made, and we want to 100% point that out. So before we close, we're going to do our last PMI of this season. That is going to be anything that has piqued my interest, or of course your interest. That can be a book, TV show, article, podcast, even a tweet from a specific person with a certain kind of hair. It doesn't matter. If it interested you, we want to hear about it. Logan, can you start for us?
Sure. I dropped my tweet thread that's really interesting. Maybe you saw the video. I'll actually do a link to the remix that was made about this woman that was like praying this crazy prayer, and she started praying like deliver us and all these things, and then she shouted to the angels. Yeah, Paula White. There you go. Angels of Africa and the angels of South America. Realizing that this is really racist. The reason she believed that angels are, it's a thread about it, that someone that kind of lived in that cult-like culture. They're saying that the reason there's angels in Africa and South America is that these are where Black and brown people are, and because they're less than and more succumb by evil, they need more angels protecting them. And so it's just really, read through the thread if you've got a minute. It's pretty interesting. I'll also drop the video that was actually a pretty catchy little song where they remixed her. Pretty funny, hilarious, because, we can't. And it's actually hilarious because also when Atlanta and Philadelphia, who were clearly driven by the Black vote, came out and they were like, these are the angels from Africa you were praying for to deliver us from Donald Trump. Just kind of a hilarious spin. But it piqued my interest because anytime we can call out racism, we should be. So, yeah.
100%. Just a quick shout out to those angels. Thank you so much for switching sides at the last minute. We love y'all. We've got sleeper agent, deep undercover agents in Africa. One of them is Adrian. Adrian, can you tell us what your PMI is, please?
Yes. My PMI is an episode of one of my favorite shows last week tonight with John Oliver. He spent his entire 30 minutes just talking about Trump's antics and all of the ridiculous lawsuits and the recounts and all of the just nonsense that he's tried to do knowingly that like this ain't gonna work. But it is still, if you are looking for a very cathartic experience to just laugh at Trump, like this is it right here. He kills this episode, and yeah, you're walking away feeling good, to be quite honest. And so that's definitely mine. It's not too long. I think it's only like 27 minutes. So yeah, if you're a fan of like late nights, you'll love this.
Excellent. And Mike, can you share for us next, please?
Yeah. So y'all see my sweatshirt. It's made by a friend of mine. His name is Brian Butler. He's an artist in Chicago. And so I'm going to put a link to his website in the chat, but I just wanted to share his homepage real quick. He does a lot of really cool art. This is all art, drawn by him. So some really cool pieces, as you'll see there. And then he has the clothing set down here, a Black-owned business. So if it's a good holiday treat. It's a really warm and smooth hoodie. So just figured I shout him out. So check out his shop when you get a chance.
That's definitely
good prices too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's smooth. It's definitely smooth, and shipping is real good. It gets to you you out in Cali, Logan, so it might take a couple weeks, but everybody else should be smooth.
I thought you said for the holidays. It's about to be over.
You get it before Christmas, dog. You get it before.
Esther, can you go for us next, please?
It's pretty quick.
Yeah, so I have a couple. So to be honest, I have not taken in very much educational content. I was very stressed this past week. So my actual PMI that I actually have been watching is The Bachelorette. Listen, it's a fantastic season, okay? It is a great way to de-stress. Listen, if you are like, I am overwhelmed by the world right now, turn on this season of The Bachelorette, okay? They got a black bachelorette because she had to come in because the other bachelor, who was a white woman, messed it all up. So definitely watch that when you need to. Just like
how apropos. Wow.
But my that I haven't actually listened to yet, but that I want to, is a podcast by Roxanne Gay and Tressie McMillan Cottom called Here to Slay. It is apparently not on Apple Podcasts, but there's a website that I think you could listen to it on. So I don't know. I'm definitely going to check that out. I'm very excited about it. But
I was definitely like, what's Heart O Slay?
Yeah, or Here to Slay. But it's actually
makes way more sense.
Facts.
Oh Slay.
So I'm kind of on a similar energy with Esther in that all week was extremely stressful. Here they are.
Hey.
Here they are.
11 minutes late. What's up?
But I've been like all this last week and this past week. Adrian and Esther know this. I've been watching Arthur, the show with the aardvark.
Yes,
and honestly, watching this joint as an adult,
hilarious.
This joint has me dead. I am laughing every episode. And honestly, y'all, it just showed me it's so important to just do things that you enjoy, that bring you joy, especially in such stressful times. Just do something that you like. And if someone's going to make fun of you for watching it like Imani, it doesn't matter. Don't listen to them.
Hey, I hate to go throw
you are. Because you are new housewives of Orange County. So Garrison and Simone, welcome. Welcome to Affirmative Interaction, our special guest. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you. First time. Good to be here.
Garrison, do you have a PMI for us?
Yo, that's hard. I actually didn't think about this. So I'd say pique my interest. Okay. Simone knows I watch Jeopardy like every single day. And I mean, not to be sad, right? Like this is really like, he's in heaven now looking down on us. So I just want to Alex,
first the Biden ad, now that we don't like his job.
Are you even Seventh-day Adventists? No, but it's honestly like
I'm not.
like Jeopardy's an amazing show. It's on Netflix, and they've been refreshing the episodes, so it's great. And honestly, I was sharing with Simone. I was like sad to hear that he died, but more than anything, just thankful for this guy's life. Thankful for just like he, as a homeschool kid, like honestly, Alex Trebek in Jeopardy really piqued my interest in learning, like for real, like no gas, right? Like he really, that show made me want to learn new things. So shout out.
Yeah. We do watch Jeopardy every single day, just for the record. So speaking of on the record, the thing that has piqued my interest this week has been the Montgomery County transcripts from the Donald Trump lawsuits that I've been reading. Yikes, guys. Very comedic, honestly. It's also devastating because they literally asked them, is there fraud? They said no. They said, is there undue influence? The Trump's lawyers said no. It's just kind of a sad thing. So so I've just kind of been reading that. I have to delve into Trump's complaint pretty soon, just out of curiosity. So, for anybody else who's just really exactly. Anybody else interested in that stuff, I can provide a link.
Excellent. And I do want to make a quick correction. It's not Real Housewives of Orange County. It's Real Housewives of Potomac. Whatever.
You're even from there? You even live in Maryland?
It hasn't been that. Look, the Potomac is far away. I don't know them. All right? I don't know them. Anyway.
It's Canadians. It's crazy.
Oh my God.
Barron Springs at it again. Incredible. Yeah, what's out there? Food deserts. That's it. So, guys.
Yikes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we're about to get a Trader Joe's out here pretty soon.
No way.
For real?
Mishawaka.
Close enough.
Mishawaka.
Very
Like 15.
Not that far. Not too bad.
That's not bad.
Well, guys, this has been the 30th episode of Affirmative Interaction. That's 30. That's a lot of episodes. So because of that, and because we've literally been through hell and high water, we're going to be taking a break. Of course, this is our season finale, and we will be back in mid-January. So in order to help you pass the time, I would suggest you listen to no other podcasts. You just sit in your room and stare at a wall. But we will be back soon to talk about things that matter, things that are important. And hopefully we'll have some new ways to do this show. And we'll bring some new ideas to the table to freshen things up and to make things even more engaging than they are now. So I have to say, as host, it's been incredibly rewarding. It's been a big learning experience doing the show with all of you, but I'm super grateful for everyone that has watched us, whether it be 10 people, 20, 30, it means a lot to us that you guys take the time out of your busy schedules and you hang out with us and we just talk about stuff. That's important. None of us are experts except me, but we're so glad that you guys want to engage with us in a meaningful way. so guys, before we end, any last words?
I can say a few things. Man, it's been fun. Definitely feel like we all got closer. I was just thinking about like when this first started, I was working at Walla Walla and I was single. But
you were not single.
I wasn't.
He was single. I was single.
Why are you it up?
That's the season finale plot twist. That's great.
You should watch the first because I'm gonna be on it.
Cut the stream.
No.
It's a clip.
I was not married, and now I am. So that's been exciting. So, got love for y'all. Y'all mad at no, I got love for y'all.
Shout out to Donnell, man. That's all I have to say. Shout out to day one, man. Just shout out season 1, top fan.
Facts. We was in here. It was like us and Donnell. Probably that first episode, bro. It was a little bleak, but now this has been really fun. Shout out to Simone and Esther, and also Danny. She's gotten a lot more busy, but y'all coming in, it really, I think, took stuff to the next level for sure. And made it so that, you know, there weren't so many dead spots or like, you know, random moments where like, you know, Jordan was rambling or something like that. So it really just brought a lot more focus to the show for sure. But now this has been fun. 30 episodes, that's crazy. If there are any graphic designers out there, please design a new logo for us. It's a free logo I created. We got to get it out of here. So y'all got time. Holla at us.
Are you?
Who you pointing at?
We do would appreciate Mike for making the logo. You really held it down. And again, thanks to Adrian for putting our show on Apple Podcasts.
Garrison, a whole film student. This dude got me. I was here looking crazy. You know, we're way over time, but like
the old days.
This dude Garrett's like, yeah, that joint looks smooth. I'm like, bro, I know this joint don't look smooth. Like, why are you lying?
Hey, man, you were willing.
Gray. It's gray for me.
Oh man, I couldn't get more colors, bro. It was a free account. I'm sorry. They just gave me the basic pastel type vibe. You feel me? That's all I had. That's all I had to work with.
Adrian, remember when you used to have this same sweater? Do you still have this one?
Honestly, I don't want to say nothing, but I've been thinking about that since you came on. Like, we had the twin going on, bro. I got mine. I should put it on. I won't put it on.
We should have coordinated. Oh well, next year.
Next year.
Next year.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Thank you again for joining us for our 30th episode. We will see you in January. Stay safe.
Keep fact checking.
True. Start fact checking those Trump votes.